Big Ten Power Rankings right here, the voice of college football. Of course, the undisputed number one in the Big Ten is Ohio State. Oh, well, the results on the field, they're supposed to matter? Okay, all right. I guess we'll have to possibly review that and get back to you on that. Please like the video, share the videos out on social media, and subscribe right here at the voice of college football. Keep in mind, Big Ten football fans, we've got team channels featuring Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. All right, let's get to those Big Ten Power Rankings. And since this is the final regular season edition, we're going to give you the high point of every team season and the low point. Let's start with Northwestern. Their high point for the Wildcats, of course, finishing 1-11, just one win in the Big Ten. The high point was playing football before anybody else did. Northwestern had its high point of 2022 before anybody else was on the field except Nebraska, because they beat Nebraska to start out at 1-0 and 1-0 in the Big Ten. Atop the power rankings that first week 0, right? Well, since then, 11 consecutive losses for Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald's team has lost 17 of 18 games. That's the low, and can it get any lower? Awful. They fired some assistant coaches this past week to try to deal with some issues on both sides of the ball for 2023. Northwestern number 14. At number 13, Rutgers. They got off to a tremendous, a 3-0 start, including a win against Boston College, which many believe to be a good ACC team entering the season, expected to win 7 or 8 football games. BC finished 3-9, so the 22-21 win at the time really looked good for Greg Schiano's team, but they finished a woeful 1 win in the Big Ten, including a season finale 37-0 shellacking at the hands of Maryland. At number 13 in the Big Ten, Rutgers. At number 12, we go to Indiana. The high point, well, Tom Allen and crew got off to a 3-0 start, including an overtime win against Western Kentucky. Then they stepped into Big Ten play and things were much, much different. 7 consecutive losses. They did eke out a nice win against Michigan State a couple weekends ago, but they lose the old Oaken bucket to Purdue to finish a dismal 4-8 on the season. Indiana football at number 12 in the Big Ten. At number 11, what a week for Nebraska. We learned the awful news concerning Mickey Joseph just here on Wednesday. More hopeful news coming 2 days earlier with Matt Rule named the new head coach at Nebraska for 2023 and beyond. So that's the high. The high is finally defeating Iowa and spoiling the Hawkeyes' season, your hated rival, knocking them out of the Big Ten championship game, and getting a new head coach, a very qualified guy who rebuilt programs at Temple and at Baylor, Matt Rule. So that's the high for Nebraska this season as they finish the season at 4-8. The low was firing Scott Frost. Now, many may not agree with me. The actual firing was not the low point. It was just the summation, the conclusion of this was a failed experiment. This was a failed tenure from Scott Frost. And he was retained for far, far too long as he continued to fail and fail and fail as Nebraska had a deplorable record under him and have not reached a bowl game since 2016. That's your low point, 5 years of failure under Scott Frost. All right, looking forward, we've got the number 10 team in the Big Ten. That's Michigan State. Sparty coming off the high of 11-2 in a top 10 finish and a Peach Bowl victory over Pitt. Got off to a 2-0 start. The high for Michigan State would have to be, well, after the tunnel incident in which they assaulted all those Michigan players, and I believe now 8 to 12 players suspended for Michigan State and still facing charges, possibly, that Michigan State, in the face of that and everything you got to conclude from that, and the culture there at Michigan State possibly not being perfect, they turned it around. They went on the road. They took on an Illinois team that was 7-1, and they pulled off an upset on the road against Illinois. That was Michigan State's high on this 5-7 season. The low for Michigan State, I think, was after those 2 initial wins, they go to Washington, they take on Michael Penix, and they get completely trashed by Washington, completely manhandled by a team that went 4-8 last year. Of course, the Huskies have shown us they're a good team this year at 10-2. but that was the beginning of the downfall. And for Michigan State after that, a 4-game losing streak in which they were outscored by 81 points in that stretch, including a loss to Minnesota 34-7. Michigan State's our number 10 team in the Big Ten. At number 9, we go to Wisconsin. They've got a new head coach in Luke Fickell, so that's a bit of a high right there, right? Luke Fickell, one of the more talented young coaches in college football, comes to Wisconsin to replace Paul Chryst. Also, while the Western Division was still up for grabs, Wisconsin had impressive back-to-back wins against Purdue and Maryland, which vaulted them into contention. The low, much like Nebraska, Paul Chryst getting fired. Now, Paul Chryst, of course, was successful at Wisconsin as opposed to Scott Frost at Nebraska. However, coming off a disappointing 24-point loss against Illinois, Paul Chryst, the firing, the dismissal, brought to light that Wisconsin has stagnated in recent years. Still a good football program, still a strong team. A lot going for this football program, but again, they have stagnated in recent years, and we're off to a dismal 6-6 finish here in the Big Ten. At number 8 in the conference, we go to Iowa. Defending Big Ten Western Division champions, finished at 7-5. Of course, the disappointment, as we start with the low. Let's start with the low with Iowa, and it's losing this final game to Nebraska. Illinois had control of the division. They relinquished it. Iowa, up and down. Of course, the offense, dismal and horrible all this time. And then they've got the division right in their sight, taking on a bad Nebraska team at home at Kinnick Stadium where they barely ever lose. And they get down 24-0 and fall 24-17 to blow the division. That's the low point on the season for Iowa, in addition to just a constant low of horrible offense and doing nothing about it. The high for Wisconsin, they went through a 3-game stretch in which they defeated Purdue, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and dominated the first 2 opponents in taking control of the division that they then squandered. Iowa's number 8 in the Big Ten in our Voice of College Football Big Ten Power Rankings. At number 7, we go to Maryland. The Terps finished at 7-5, 4-5 in the Big Ten. They concluded their season with a whitewashing of Rutgers, 37-0. Maryland's high point, 3-0 start. Then even with the first loss, it was at Michigan. They made a number of mistakes, but were still able to hang in that game at 34-27 and play on the road at the Big House that well. So got off to a great start. They also had a win after that loss against Michigan State, so they got off to a 4-1 start. The low had to be back-to-back losses to Wisconsin and Penn State. They got slapped in the face and beaten up by the Badgers and the Nittany Lions to the tune of 53-10. Maryland's our number 7 team in the Big Ten. At number 6 in the conference, we go to Minnesota. The Gophers finish at 8-4, following a close win against Wisconsin. The high for PJ Fleck and company starting out at 4-0. They did not play anyone, but still, they looked dominant. They look like they may be the team and the most complete team in the Big Ten Western Division. But after that 4-0 start in which they outscored their opponents 193-24, the low came against Iowa, 13-10 loss. They had 2 red zone turnovers. They could have won the game. They could have taken control of the division. Minnesota loses to Iowa 13-10 again. 2 turnovers late in the ball game, last 2 possessions. Minnesota, of course, finishes at 8-4, and they're our number 6 team in the Big Ten. At number 5, we go to a team that's still playing football. They are playing for the Big Ten championship. Could they possibly be at number 1 in our power rankings if they pull off the 16.5-point upset? That would be Purdue, of course. I like to put Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois in the same category. They play the same style of football. They run it down your throat, play action, defense wins the games. Iowa's on a different plane, though, in regards to the defense, just taking the football away from people, and they're just better at defense. But Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, strong defenses this year, and of course, run the football. The past games, limited to be kind. Purdue is the complete just aberration in the division. They are up and down. They sling it around. They put playmakers in space. Aiden O'Connell's the best quarterback in the division, and Purdue found a way to win the Big Ten Western Division. They're 8-4 overall, 6-3 in the conference. They're high, definitely. They went on the road to beat Minnesota. That was the first statement win, 20-10. Later in the year, when they were reeling, they went to Illinois. Champaign pulled off the upset against Illinois. Those are the highs for Purdue, winning the big games in division. And then, of course, the clincher against Indiana. They had to defeat the Hoosiers on the road to take the Big Ten Western Division. The low, well, they had back-to-back losses against Wisconsin and Iowa, in which they got completely dominated. They were 3-3 at that point, but again, they won the final three to win the Big Ten Western Division. Purdue's our number 5 team in the Big Ten. So we've got 4 more, and that includes a team that actually did not win the Big Ten Western Division. Yes, Illinois is our number 4 team in the Big Ten, and yes, they lost to Purdue, but look at the overall level of play. They had to play Michigan in the other division, and they played the Wolverines extremely strong. If they would have game managed that situation late a little bit better, they may have pulled off the upset. Illinois rode a high of defeating Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota in back-to-back-to-back weeks. 3 wins over those 3 programs for the first time since 1983 when they went to the Rose Bowl for the last time. No, they went in 2007, of course, with Juice Williams at quarterback. But 1983 Big Ten champions. That's the last time they won the championship. All right, the low for Illinois, the home loss to Purdue, as we mentioned, and that lost the division. And what got that tailspin, that mini tailspin started, was losing to Michigan State at home. Illinois is our number 4 team in the Big Ten. At number 3, the last 3 are clear-cut. They're 3, they're 2, they're 1. There is no doubt, there is no argument. Penn State beat everybody else in the Big Ten and beat them soundly. They beat everybody soundly, not just barely. Following that really good game against Purdue the first week of the season, 35-31, and that's, of course, Penn State. They finished at 10-2. Should take their New Year's 6 bowl appearance here in a few days. They had that high of going to the Plains and defeating Auburn. No, Auburn's not a good football team, but SEC country going on the Plains, winning at Jordan-Hare Stadium in dominant fashion. Also, that 30-0 win against Maryland when the Terps looked like they might break into the upper division status in the Big Ten Eastern Division. And then finally, Penn State at 10-2, New Year's 6 bowl appearance, most likely. That's the high point on the season. The low point, dominated at Michigan, blow a lead at Ohio State, taking on the Buckeyes at home, in which they lost by 13 points. So Penn State can't get the job done against the 2 heavyweights in the conference. Penn State, our number 3 team in the Big Ten. At number 2 is Michigan. Just wanted to see the reaction. At number 2, Ohio State, of course, 11-1, lost the game to Michigan. We have discussed, debated, torn it apart, done everything possible in analyzing Ohio State's woes against the Wolverines in the second half. Check out all the videos, all the live streams. Must I repeat it here? That's the low point in the season. Michigan, of course, that's the only loss. There was a bit of a low to a certain extent when they went to Northwestern. They showed some warts there in the running game for the first time against Northwestern, against a bad defense. So run game and injuries at the running back position late in the season was a low that, of course, showed up against Michigan, as well as the defensive issues that we saw with the big plays. Ohio State's high. It started with Notre Dame. Got to play physical against a physical team. They did that in the fourth quarter. Mayan Williams and that ground attack against Notre Dame. And then, of course, continuing to dominate. The Penn State win in the fourth quarter, the Maryland win in the fourth quarter, the highs for Ohio State football, and just basically start to finish or start to game 11 domination for the Buckeyes at number 2. And the number 1 team in the Big Ten, there is no doubt, no question about it, back-to-back Big Ten champions, Michigan, 12-0, undefeated. The low on the season, guess it's got to be the Illinois game. And then probably everything that they had to take as criticism after 3 games against 3 cream puffs to start non-conference play, that they really hadn't played anyone. And they didn't in the non-conference. Would have loved to have seen Michigan play a legitimate Power 5 team out of conference. And then again, the low leading into the Ohio State game barely getting by Illinois. Probably should have lost that game, but they got the job done. Jake Moody with a game-winning field goal at the gun. That's the low. It's not a bad low. The high, going to Columbus, winning for the first time in 22 years, claiming a second consecutive Big Ten championship. J.J. McCarthy comes through. No Blake Corum. They still get the job done with Donovan Edwards in the fourth quarter. There it is. Michigan domination at the end of the game against Ohio State. Your number one team in the Big Ten is, of course, Michigan, as they play the Big Ten title game in Indy against Purdue this weekend. Ohio State's number 2, Penn State 3. Our number 4 team in the Big Ten is Illinois, followed by Purdue. Where would they shoot if they pulled off the upset and won the Big Ten championship? At number 6, Minnesota. Maryland's at 7. We've got Iowa 8, Wisconsin 9, Michigan State 10. Nebraska's number 11. Then we go Indiana, Rutgers, and Northwestern. 1 through 14 in the Big Ten. Your thoughts below, right here at the Voice of College Football. See you next time.